Bueno, buenos días a todos, muchas gracias por venir. Vitálik, gracias por estar en Argentina. 2 veces en un año.
Sí, y ya, muchas gracias para hacer esta charla conmigo.
Wow. We're gonna switch to English because we're gonna be talking about Ethereum and the merge and everything. And I don't want to put Vitálik on the spot, but his Spanish has been improving a lot. So maybe next year we can actually do it completely in Spanish. We'll see.
Sí.
But anyway, I don't even know where to start because it's been an incredibly crazy week. You know what's happened with the whole FTX, the SBF drama, and you know, only reinforces everything that we try to do with decentralizations and transparency and trustlessness. But let's start with Ethereum and the merge, because this is called after the merge. What were you doing when the Ethereum merge happened? That was like 2 months ago, right?
No, so I was in Berlin. I had actually just come back from that visit to Kiev in Ukraine that I made right before. And I ended up getting a bit of a cold. I did like 4 tests and it ended up not being COVID. But, you know, people told me going to Ukraine would be dangerous. It turned out to be a little bit dangerous in that way. But so I was mostly just quarantining in a hotel room for a few days, unfortunately, but then, you know, did kind of go outside for a little bit, waved to the Ethereum people in their office, and, you know, just kind of peacefully sitting, you know, looking at the internet, looking at Zoom, looking at, you know, the Twitter, back before the Twitter became what it is today.
And just, some people said that the merge was almost a little bit anticlimactic, right?
Because it was very anticlimactic.
Because it worked. It just, I had my logs, I don't know what you run, I run Nimbus and Aragon, and I had my logs open to see the pandas, and I saw them, and then everything just kept on working.
And it's, I think the uneventfulness was actually something that surprised everyone, right? Because if you look at what happened during like any of the test net launches that we did, right? Like all of them had at least one bug of some kind. It was never a really fatal bug, but it was always, you know, oh, there was like one problem with one client combination, and 10% of the network went offline, and you know, things were unstable for a little bit, and then, you know, something happened to 35% of the network, and then we didn't even finalize for an entire hour. And there were always just like little problems, and they were never fatal problems, but, you know, always like various little things would happen. And then when it came time for the real merge to come, it's like, whoa, nothing, you know, everything just went through completely smoothly. And, you know, up until this block, the network was running proof of work, and then after that block, the network was running proof of stake. And I think if all you did was like just, you know, kept on downloading the latest versions of the client, then, and you weren't really following the internet, the chances are you wouldn't even notice that anything, you know, any kind of switch in consensus algorithms or anything even happened, right? So I think in that sense, no, the switch to proof of stake went extremely smoothly.
Well, congratulations to you and to the hundreds of people who worked on it. So now we live in a proof of stake world. So what has changed, actually? Besides from, you know, the energy reduction, but in terms of blocks are coming in every 12 seconds now.
Yes.
Does that have any impact on the network?
Yeah, so a couple of impacts, right? So one is, so this is like where we get into these really detailed properties of proof of stake, and like, to be fair, you can't kind of like put all of the credit on proof of stake and just say like these are entirely arguments for why proof of stake is like good and proof of work is bad, because like it is theoretically possible to make proof of work systems that have something close to these properties, right? It's just the switch to proof of stake was also an opportunity for us to kind of reimagine how the consensus worked and like really try real hard to make something with all of the most advanced ideas and the best properties, right? So like one example is like in proof of work, there's this concept of a Poisson distribution, right? Like every second there was a 1 in 13 chance that a block would come. Like actually it's like every millisecond there's a 1 in 13,000 chance a block would come, every nanosecond there's a 1 in 13 billion chance a block would come, right? But it's this kind of random distribution where the result is that the block times are very uneven, right? Like sometimes you have a block coming 1 second after another block, sometimes you have a block coming 55 seconds after another block, and everything in between. Sometimes you'd have 2 blocks coming at almost exactly the same time, and that's a big part of why the uncle rate in proof of work is so high, unless you have a very long block time. So in proof of stake, on the other hand, it's like 1 block, 12 seconds, 1 block, 12 seconds, 1 block, 12 seconds, right? And from the user's point of view, this actually improves the experience quite a bit, right? Because from a user's point of view, like in a proof of work system, sometimes your transaction gets included in 10 seconds, and then sometimes it gets included only after 1 minute, just because there weren't even any blocks that were coming for 1 minute, right? It's actually interesting. This is one of these mathematical paradoxes that like just the 2 different distributions happen, right? It's that in proof of work, on average, a block comes every 12 seconds, but if you send a transaction, on average, you have to wait 12 seconds, right? Because it's this property of Poisson distributions, they're kind of what's called memoryless, like if a block hasn't come for some amount of time, well, on average, you still have to wait 12 more seconds. But then in proof of stake, a block comes every 12 seconds, but on average, a transaction if you send a transaction, you have to wait 6 seconds, right? Because on average, when you send a transaction, you're halfway through a slot. Yep. And like, this is one of those things that's sort of mathematically fascinating, kind of very counterintuitive in that sort of Monty Hall way, right? But it's also a real gain for users. Like they have to wait less time between when their transaction gets sent and when their transaction gets included, and like the worst case is much less bad, right? So that's a UX improvement, and it comes on top of a previous UX improvement that we made 2 years ago, which is EIP 1559, right? Like, I'm sure who here remembers that Ethereum existed before EIP 1559? Okay, so I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure think have only joined Ethereum within the last 2 years as well. It's still a rapidly growing community. But for those who remember that kind of already ancient history, right? What happened in that era was that you would send a transaction, and sometimes it would get included in the next block, but sometimes there would be a bunch of full blocks that have a bunch of like very high fees, and you would accidentally set your fees to be too low, and you would have to wait like sometimes 1 minute, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes you just have to like totally reset your transaction, right?
Non-sophisticated sophisticated users would often reset transactions with increasing nonce, and then that would be even worse.
Exactly, yeah. So that's like, yeah, basically, back then, like, you just have to wait, like, potentially a very long time, and it was just crazy, right? And EIP 1559 improved things a lot, because after EIP 1559, there's, 80% of blocks are not full, and so there's a close to 80% chance that your transaction just gets included in the next block, right? And, a more than 90% chance your transaction gets included within 2 blocks. Then with the merge, the block time became more regular, and that 80% also increased to 90%, right? So this is like, the result is that just from a user's point of view, the user experience of just sending a transaction and getting a transaction included, like, it actually just kept on increasing, and like over the last 2.5 years, it just kept on getting better and better, right? Which is, I think, great. I think it's one of those things that we often don't talk about much, because it's, it almost even feels accidental how it happened, and it was never really advertised as like a big benefit of EIP 1559 or even a big benefit of proof of stake. But it happened, and sending transactions is like, they get included like 5 times more quickly now, right? So that's like one really subtle benefit. Another really subtle benefit is even one slot is like a much stronger confirmation now than it was 2 months ago, right? So there's a page, if you go to, I think it's etherscan.io/blocks/forked, right? That just lists all of the blocks that looked like they were part of the chain, but then became not part of the chain, right? So, like, not just, so what happened before the merge is that there would be multiple fork blocks daily, I think often even multiple fork blocks every hour. And after the merge, it's like, oh, there would be like 2 of them every week, right? Now, why do those fork blocks even happen at all? Well, pretty much always it's because you have some node that's just very not well connected to the network and they're a bad proposer, and they just publish a block like 5 to 12 seconds later than they should. And then there is, of course, some 50-50 split, and it takes like 1 or 2 slots to resolve. But unless something really exceptional like that happens, otherwise it's just perfect. You get a block, the block gets attested, you get a block, the block gets attested, you get a block, the block gets attested, and the chain just keeps going like perfect clockwork, right? So the chains become more stable, the chains become more secure. It's from the user's point of view, it doesn't even feel like there's a new feature. It feels like a lot of annoyances just quietly went away, right? Which is a lot of the time the best kind of progress.
You mentioned the IP 1559. Ether went ultrasound finally this week.
Yes.
That was a big moment. So 2 months ago, the total supply of Ether, when the merge happened a few days ago, that number is now lower. So were you expecting that 2 months after the merge? And also why it happened, right? FTX blowing up and liquidations happening.
Right, no, it's interesting. Like, people talk about anti-fragility a lot, and in some ways, in the literal sense of just being something that benefits from disorder, and it turns out that the ETH supply kind of does that, right? Like, whenever something crazy happens, and there's a lot of activity on chain, and gas prices go up, and because of EIP 1559, that means that like ETH actually gets taken out of circulation, right? It's definitely a weird side effect, actually. Also not something that we were expecting, right? It's but basically, so EIP 1559, right? Just for for those who aren't super familiar with it, like basically, it's this change to how the fee market works that has a lot of different consequences. So the basic way that it works is before and like still in Bitcoin, right? So in Bitcoin and in Ethereum before August 2020, what happens is that you send a transaction, and then blocks are almost always full, and blocks just include whichever transactions pay the highest fee, right? And whatever fee you set, that's the fee that you pay. After EIP 1559, blocks are on average half full, and there's this concept of a base fee, right? There's like a base fee and a priority fee. The base fee is like the fee that everyone has to pay, and then priority fees are like an extra tip that you add to the miner, and if there's temporary congestion, then transactions with higher priority fees get in first, right? And the base fee gets adjusted by the protocol so that on average blocks are half full, right? And so the original economic reasoning for EIP 1559 is that there's a lot of economic research around the inefficiencies of first price auctions, right? So a first price auction is an auction where, like, when you make a bid and you pay what the bid is, as opposed to, like, for example, a second price auction where the winner actually pays the amount that is the second highest bid. And there's some pretty deep reasons for why second price auctions are like theoretically optimal, actually. But the reason why we did not switch from a first price auction to a second price auction is because second price auctions, the argument for their optimality depends on this assumption that there's no collusion going on, right? Like basically that the top bidder and the second bidder are not talking to each other. It turns out that if the top two bidders are talking to each other, then second price auctions still break. But So instead, we went with this mechanism where there is a price, and there's just like a lot of open space for transactions available at that price. And you can send a transaction, and you can set what your highest price is, and you either get included or you don't. And only in these very exceptional cases where there's like a huge spike of transaction, do you get like this auction with priority fees, right? So from a kind of game theory lens, it looks like, oh, the inefficiencies associated with first price auctions go away. From a user's point of view, it's like this really dumb trade-off between having to pay a really high fee versus having to wait an extra 5 minutes for your transaction to get included goes away, and instead, like, everyone pays the fair fee and they get included very quickly most of the time, right? So that's the APO 1559. One of the side effects is that there's this base fee, and instead of that base fee going to the miner, that base fee has to get burned, right? And there's some good reasons why it has to get burned. Basically, if it went to the miner, that would create incentives for like side channel payments, right? Like miners would start offering private deals that say, hey, if you send to me, I'm going to give you a 90% refund. And to avoid any incentives to create that sort of thing, the base fee ends up just getting burned, right? But then, of course, the burning itself kind of took on a life of its own, and it turned into a meme and the whole ultrasound money thing. And so, the ultrasound money thing is kind of a bit of a joke, right? It's like, if sound money is money that has fixed supply, then ultrasound money is money where the supply goes down, right? Yeah. And, finally, we're at the point where the supply actually has gone down. It's actually interesting in that I'm not sure what I would have predicted, right? Because even today, even right now, we are realistically still at this sort of fairly low fee stage of Ethereum's history, right? Like right now, for the last fees. Yeah, like for the last 2 months, average fees have been around 16 gwei or so, right? And then in the 2 months before, average fees have been like, sometimes 5 gwei, 10 gwei, like very low. But then half a year ago or a year ago, there were like entire months where average fees were like 50 gwei, right? Yeah. So Ethereum's, the fees in Ethereum are actually significantly cheaper than they were before, right? And demand for sending transactions is lower. It is a bear. It is a period of like temporarily less huge excitement than there was a year ago. And there were really crazy things happening, like even 6 months ago. Like there was that one day when there was like one of those monkey projects, right? They launched a sale, and they set a fixed price and they set a fixed supply, and there was like this big blow up where they set the fixed price too low. Everyone rushed in to buy the monkeys first, and it just basically turned into an auction, except the auction happened through setting really high fees on the transactions. And what happened was that because the APO 1559 was turned on, something like 80,000 ETH, I think, or 60,000 ETH, I think, or like some number like that, was burned in a single day. Wow. And this was before the merge, right? And 60,000 ETH back then in a single day, and now the entire Sampire blew up, but only about 5,000 ETH got burned, right? So it's interesting how kind of the general level of kind of just excitement in a market can really kind of intersect sort of multiplicatively with these events, right? It's like when a crazy event happens, if things were already crazy, then like no, it's not crazy plus crazy, it's crazy squared, right? And like we actually have not gotten crazy squared, but because it's
we haven't seen that.
Right,
yet.
Exactly. But because it's post-merge, and the merge does decrease issuance by like somewhere between 80 and 90%. It's even still, like the events of the past week have been enough to like basically burn more ETH than or like push the total amount of ETH that has been burned since the merge up to the level where it's greater than everything that was issued since the merge, right? And I think the last time I checked, which was yesterday, about 5,000 ETH more has been burned than has been issued, right? So I think we're like at about somewhere between 110% and 120% burn on average at the moment, which was interesting, right? But it was fascinating to see that effect in action. I mean, it was fascinating to see all the effects in action, right? Like it's fascinating to see the burn in action. It's also fascinating to see it just like the better user experience of EAP 1559 and post-merge block times coming together in action, right? Like, like I do actually use the chain regularly, right? And it's like it has noticeably gotten slowly just kept on turning into a better and better experience.
Yeah, I don't think I have to modify gas in MetaMask anymore. It just, unless I want to be very granular, but it just really works. I know we have a lot of Bitcoiners in the crowd, so I'm going to start asking a couple of more complicated questions and see if you can appease them or maybe bring them over to our side. Proof of stake. A lot of people say it made Ethereum more decentralized, and a lot of people said that it made it more centralized. What do you think when you see big staking pools like Lido, even if they do have individual entities, or you see Coinbase staking, Kraken, those big numbers?
Yeah, and so I would say, if you look at the charts, it on the whole, it has gotten quite a bit more decentralized, right? So, if you look at the pre-merge proof of work charts, just in terms of how many mining pools it takes to get to 50%, and then, it's sometimes 2 mining pools, sometimes 3 mining pools, right? Obviously those are pools, and yes, you can leave a pool internally and all of those things, right? But it was definitely still less decentralization than we wanted. And then post-merge, obviously the biggest actor is Lido, right? But and I would definitely prefer if many more people solo stakes than participating in Lido, but at the same time, I think it's important to avoid going to the other extreme, right? And it's important to remember that the internal decentralization of Lido is pretty significant, right? There's 21 validators that Lido staking is split between, and there is some pretty sophisticated smart contract logic, right? So it's not like a central system that does the allocating, there's an on-chain governance mechanism, and then even if the on-chain governance breaks, that it's not going to be able to reallocate the stakers immediately, because you can't just reallocate staking power that's already staking. It would be a slow process, and people would see it, and people would have a lot of time to switch away and switch to something else, right? So Lido itself is quite a few actors, and then after that, okay, you have your Coinbase, you have Kraken, and then you still have, quite a lot of solo staking happening, right? I think one of the big benefits of proof of stake from a decentralization perspective, right, is that it is censorship resistant just in terms of a person's ability to run a solo staking node and do actually effectively hide from anyone who would wants to censor them and shut them down, right? Proof of work, it requires especially in the ASIC era, right? Big mining rigs, a lot, big capital investments, specialized hardware production, lots of electricity consumption, things that can be tracked, right? Yep. And the nice thing about proof of stake is, well, all you have to do to be a staker is you just run a node, and you can run it on even a tiny computer. You could even run it at home, or and all you need is just a medium good internet connection, right? And if you want, you can stick it behind a VPN. If you want, you can do lots of things, right? And then if you stick it behind a VPN, then just even if you're staking thousands of ETH and you have to connect to every subnet and you have huge bandwidth, you're just at worst, you're indistinguishable from just someone who downloads movies a lot or plays games a lot, right? So it's, from a censorship resistance perspective, I think it actually holds up quite well, right? But that's so that's a theory, right? And then in practice, I think in terms of the distribution, I think things are okay now. I think things can improve, and I think the thing that will make things improve is when withdrawals become enabled, right? This is the thing that has not happened yet, and I think people still haven't fully updated to it, right? Because right now, withdrawals have not yet been enabled, staking is not yet liquid, and so if you stake, you just have to keep staking until withdrawals do get enabled. And that does give a kind of liquidity benefit to joining Lido or joining any staking service, or whether it's a DAO or it's a centralized system, right? But after withdrawals, then if you got your 32 ETH, you'll be in the you run a node, and you will be able to withdraw immediately. And then if you decide to stake through a staking pool, then you will be able to also withdraw and actually withdraw power from whoever's running that staking pool and give your staking power to someone else, right? So the same thing that you can do with proof of work mining pools. So after withdrawals, things improve a lot. The other issue that I think is worth getting to directly, right, that I think a lot of people are concerned right now is this whole transaction censorship because of builders and MEV issue. Right?
That was my next question.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I think it is worth talking about, right? And it's it's worth mentioning both that first of all, regardless of all the noise, right? Censorship resistance in terms of transactions getting into blocks is a one of n trust model, right? You just have to wait until there's one staker that includes you, right? So even if 90% of people start censoring, which is way more than happens on the Ethereum network right now, you would just have to wait on average 10 slots, right? And 10 slots is 120 seconds, 2 minutes, which is about the same, ironically enough, as you would have had to wait on average pre-EIP 1559 and pre-proof of stake, and then your transaction would get included, right? So it's basically, we still have a long way to go before this actually becomes a significant problem for users who are vulnerable to censorship from a network perspective. But then at the same time, I think we don't want to be one step away from having big protocol level censorship problems. We want to be 10 steps away, right?
Yep.
And I think right now we're not 10 steps away, and it's important to acknowledge that, and it's important to talk about the things that we can do and the things that we are doing to get to the level where we're 10 steps away, right? So I think one thing that's important to emphasize is that MEV is not a property of proof of stake, right? MEV is a property of blockchains that support sophisticated applications in general, right? And it's important to clear up this misconception because lots of people do have this misconception. I've even talked to regulators that have this misconception, right? Basically, the misconception I think exists for a very simple reason, which is that the whole MEV situation and the proof of stake switch happened at basically the same time, right? But the reason why MEV exists is because there are these sophisticated applications that create this property that they create a big incentive to make a lot of money by getting your transaction in first, right? So if you look at something like Uniswap, let's say, if right now the price of ETH is 1,300, and then 12 seconds later, we get some news and Sam did something else, and the price of ETH on Binance immediately drops to 1,250, right? Then that creates an on-chain opportunity on Uniswap to sell ETH for DAI or ETH for USDC on Uniswap, and all the way down to until the price on Uniswap gets to the 1,250 level, right? And whoever can make the first transaction in the next block, they're the ones that can do that, and they're the ones that can just grab up and sell all of that ETH on average at 1275 and make a pretty significant arbitrage profit, right? Mm-hmm. Something like Bitcoin does not have an equivalent to this, and I do think that this is one of the virtues of having blockchains that do not support sophisticated applications at layer one, right? Because there is no way to make something like Uniswap on top of Bitcoin. There is no way to, make something like MakerDAO on top of Bitcoin. And, MakerDAO, in this case, it has MEV because of liquidations, right? And, I remember there was one moment during the crash 2 years ago where there was a period of 2 minutes during which Justin Sun could have been liquidated for $1 billion, right?
On liquidity.
Exactly, but he didn't, right? And like that was a $100 million MEV opportunity that just ended up not getting claimed because the infrastructure was not sophisticated enough, right? But like Bitcoin as a blockchain that does not support what I call rich statefulness is does not have MEV opportunities of this type. Now it still can, right? So like if, for example, right now I publicly speak the private key to one of my wallets, then that creates an MEV opportunity, and everyone's going to be immediately taking out their laptops, probably even here in this audience, and like trying to enter the private key and be the first to like import it into a wallet and send a transaction out, right? And people are going to bid up again and try to replace by fee each other, but that's the. But like that's much more rare in Bitcoin than it is in Ethereum, right? And that is because Ethereum supports these more advanced applications at layer 1. Now, there's this interesting question of, could Ethereum get to the point where it is sort of less MEV heavy, right? And this gets into one of the discussions in Ethereum philosophy, which is like MEV mitigation versus MEV kind of redistribution and a sort of MEV reclaiming, right? And on the MEV mitigation side, like one way in which it could happen is if we all move to layer 2s, right? Because if we move to layer 2s, then like at least all of that crazy activity happens in a system that's sort of one step removed from Ethereum proper, and Ethereum proper can kind of focus on being this more sort of safe and secure layer 1, and the one layer of distance between sort of the layer 1 and the craziness actually means that the craziness doesn't kind of pose a systemic risk to the decentralization of the layer 1 in the same way, right? So that's one approach, and that's happening. We have layer 2s, and we also have applications that are more MEV minimized, like CowSwap is a good example. And then there's the MEV mitigation side, right? And the MEV kind of like reclaiming side, right? And that's where we have these discussions of like proposer-builder separation and MEV markets. And so what the idea there is basically to say like, okay, MEV is an issue, and there are these profits that can be claimed by just capturing the first the opportunity to choose what the first transaction is within the next block. And what happens there is, so what happens there right now, right, is that we have this system called MEV Boost, which basically allows proposers to auction off the full rights to choose what goes on in their block, right? And on the one hand, it's good that these systems exist, right? Because if these systems did not exist, then just being able to make profits from MEV would be something that's only available to like very sophisticated staking pools, and then like Coinbase and Lido domination would really be a big problem, right? But fortunately, we do have these outsourcing markets, and because of these outsourcing markets, even the little guy does actually have a chance to, make these sophisticated MEV profits without having to figure out MEV and run complicated software themselves, because they just basically outsource the right to make a block, right?
And it can be extremely profitable.
Exactly.
As we've seen in periods of volatility. It's almost like a lottery for somebody running maybe 1 or 2 validators, but we've seen block rewards of 350, 380, almost
Exactly,
400.
yeah, it's huge, right?
Yes.
Now, the problem that we have now, though, is that because it's like a full block auction, right, it does create this other censorship risk, which is that if you're outsourcing the right to create a full block and you're outsourcing to sophisticated actors, then like sophisticated actors do have a kind of, a high sort of vulnerability to censorship footprint, right? Because, these are often big and powerful companies. They're, not, random cypherpunk anons or whatever. And, and they're definitely sort of, they're further away from being random cypherpunk anons than the individual stakers are, right? And the problem right now is that they choose the full contents of the block. And so the next stage in Ethereum, or in the development of these MEV marketplaces, is basically, can we outsource the ability to choose the enough of the block that you can claim the MEV revenue without outsourcing the right to choose everything about the block, right? So there's different names for this, like there's inclusion lists, there's partial block auctions, there's just a bunch of different ways to refer to kind of the same concept, but the concept is basically that we give the proposer to choose some things, and we give the builder that they're outsourcing to the ability to choose other things, where we try to split those some things and the other things in such a way that the other things give the builder enough freedom to claim the MEV, but then the some things still give the proposer enough freedom to ensure that any transactions that they want to see included actually will be included, right? And so we give back the proposer the ability to choose and say, here are transactions I know about, and I want to guarantee that these transactions are going to be included, which is the status quo that we have today, or the status quo that we had before MEV became an issue, the status quo that also exists today in Bitcoin, but at the same time, we do get some of the benefits of specialization, right? So this is the next step. This is the hope. And
one quick one.
Mariano.
Yes.
Sorry. You still have 10 minutes. We won't open to questions.
Yeah.
So you can do your own side. No, we won't open. You just
have we already been talking for like 50 minutes? It's crazy.
Sorry.
Okay. Let me ask a final one then. Oh man, wanted to talk about so many things. So we talked a lot about this. This is the scourge, right? This is MEV becoming like a main topic of. Are you worried that there might be a monopoly of proposers? Of builders. And can that be mitigated? And if you can just answer a couple of minutes, and then we'll have.
Sure, yeah, no, it's a good concern. Like, I think a lot of what I've just talked about now is like mitigating the consequences of a monopoly of builders. But I think, once again, we'd rather be 10 steps away from the protocol censoring than 5 steps away, right? And so I think it's important to kind of take all paths at the same time, right? And the path that I talked about is surviving a builder monopoly and making sure that Ethereum, would not censor and transactions will be included very quickly, even within 2 slots or 1 slot, even if there's a builder monopoly. But we should also talk about the aspect of how to prevent a builder monopoly or minimize the chance that a builder monopoly emerges in the first place. And in that case, I think there's a bunch of different ideas, right? So one of them is this concept of decentralized builders, right? Where instead of a builder being this kind of monolithic centralized actor, the builder itself can be a protocol. Now, you might ask, well, what's the benefit of the builder being a protocol? Why would this outcompete centralized builders? And the theory would be that builders that are protocols would be able to take inputs from a lot of different independent actors that are called searchers, right? And searchers are independent actors that know individual strategies for extracting MEV. So one searcher might specialize in, arbitraging Uniswap. Another searcher might specialize in liquidations. Another one might specialize in, buying digital monkeys that have been underpriced. Different searchers would specialize in different strategies, and then they would all talk to this decentralized builder protocol, and there would be some privacy protection. Could be SGX, could be MPC, could be ZK snarks, could be some combination of lots of things. And they would work together, and the builder protocol would create a block that combines together inputs from a lot of different searchers, and then that builder as a protocol would then propose that combined block to the proposer, right? Yeah. And so the idea there would be that instead of each block being created, instead of the agency in creating even the part of the block that collects MEV being concentrated in one actor, it would actually come from lots of actors, and there would be a merging protocol that would be able to combine the inputs from all of those lots of actors together, right? And so instead of having a dominant builder, you would actually have a very diverse searcher ecosystem that would make it easy for new searchers to join, right?
Yep.
So
very
that's...
I'm sorry, if anybody has questions, I don't know if they're doing microphones or somebody's standing up and...
That's good.
Right.
Hello. Hi, I'm Santiago Casina from Cointelegraph. Oh. I just want to ask you what are your thoughts of crypto Twitter attacking so much on Cardano and Charles Hoskinson?
No comments.
Thank you.
No.
Orador?
Hi, Vitálik. Welcome. What are your thoughts on the recent events of the industry and what can we learn as a community?
Okay, I think the big takeaway that I would want people to have and that I would even want the non-crypto world to have is ask not whether or not crypto, or whether crypto succeeded or failed, but ask which parts of crypto succeeded and which parts of crypto failed, right? Because I think in some ways asking that question gives you the opposite lesson in a lot of ways, right? Like, if you think about regulation, for example, as a binary and like as a knob of, either the either we let exchanges have more fun or we force them to be more stodgy. It makes it feel like it sometimes seems like more regulation is better, but like you really have to dig into the details and say like what kind of regulation are we talking about, and and then on the flip side, like what kind of crypto projects are we talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, the FTX is a centralized exchange. It was also an exchange that was headquartered in the Bahamas, which was a choice that was in part motivated by the lack of a US regulatory framework that let them do what they wanted to do. It was a exchange run by a person who was very politically connected and who apparently was in the process of trying pretty hard to get some no action letters from the SEC, who donated a huge amount to all kinds of politicians. That was what ended up breaking and creating a really big $10 billion splat for everyone. What parts of crypto ended up not failing? The networks did not fail. Bitcoin did not fail. Ethereum did not fail. Solana did not fail, actually. The Solana network did not have any outage as a result of the craziness, right? So,
but the oracles didn't update, so
a
liquidation took like 2 days.
Right. MakerDAO did not fail. Uniswap did not fail. Even crypto DeFi lending platforms did not fail, right? It was interesting, right? When, I think Alameda and like some of the other crazy funds, it might have been 3AC, like, those guys, right? It's, they took out lots of loans in lots of places. They did DeFi loans and they did CeFi loans. What happened with the CeFi loans? Well, sometimes they were able to convince the CeFi operators to just give them loans without collateral because well, look, they just look like responsible, nice guys. What about the DeFi loans? They're like, sorry, I'm a piece of code, and I'm a piece of code, and I can't see what kind of suit you wear, and I can't see the the color of your skin and the color of your political platform. So no, gotta give me collateral. And, the DeFi won, right? And, DeFi first. Platforms totally survived, right? And it's, and I... So, it's... so self-custody won. That's a big one, right? I think there were a lot of people who were hurt by the FTX crash that totally did not engage in any kind of crazy degen leverage stuff, right? They just safe. They just wanted a place to park their coins, right? Yeah. And for a lot of people, parking their coins, they need to park their coins somewhere, and self-custody worked, centralized solutions did not work. But at the same time, as I think I said on the panel yesterday, it's important to recognize, why people used the centralized platforms and not self-custody options, which is that centralized platforms provide a lot of convenience that self-custody doesn't, right? Like setting up self-custody effectively is still hard, right? And you have to figure your way out around Gnosis safe wallets. You know, you have to understand if you're doing the hardware option, like, you know, you have to carry a hardware wallet around and you have to write down the 12 words. And you know, if you're a nomad, you have to figure out, like, okay, where are the 12 words even going to be stored? Yeah. And you know, if you store the 12 words in your house, then like, what happens if your house burns down? What happens if you know, people learn that you're a millionaire and they go and rob your house, right? And there's just like lots of complexity still, but you know, centralized options. It's like, hey, you know, Sam, he's a nice guy. You know, his face is all over in San Francisco, and you know, just like put the coins on his platform, and it's trustworthy, right? So, but you know, we saw the limits of that model over the last week. But I think we can't just rely on the stick. We have to rely on the carrot, right? Yeah. And the carrot is that, like, you know, we actually have to make the DeFi and self-custody options actually work better, right? And I think you know, we in both the Bitcoin community and the Ethereum community, like, you know, really value self-custody, really value you know, open and transparent code, and we have to like improve things to the point where those options actually are people's first choice, and you know, where they actually are powerful enough and easy to use enough to you know, really do a good job of serving people's needs. And so I hope that's the side of the crypto ecosystem that is going to see more of the spotlight over the next few years.
Amazing. I think we're out of time, or can we do one last one?
What?
One last question. One last question or a conclusion.
Okay.
From you. No.
No?
From the public, no.
Oh,
no.
crap.
No time.
Find us later, and we'll
okay.
maybe we'll take some questions. Okay, let's do a...
Bueno, un aplauso para Vitálik y para Mariano.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias, Vitálik. Él estaba hablando y yo estaba tomando agua. Es impresionante.
Gracias.